how can you truly comprehend a massive battle like Gettysburg? It stretched over 3 days, involved 150,000 people, and countless acts of bravery, mistakes, and sheer survival. Rather than overwhelming you with timelines, maps, or lists of units, it's often the individual stories, those moments of humanity in the fog of war, that stick with us. Today, on Where in History, we're diving into some of the personal tales from the Battle of Gettysburg that reveal the people behind the history. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, and let us know in the comments what other military history you'd like to explore next. John Burns. On July 1st, 1863, the first day of the Battle of Gettysburg, most of the town's 2,400 residents did what you'd expect. They either hid in their homes or fled the area. But one man didn't. John Burns, a 69-year-old veteran of the War of 1812, couldn't stand the thought of Confederate forces taking over his hometown. He grabbed his old musket and headed out to join the fight. Approaching Union officers, Burns offered his services. Amused by this elderly man with a flintlock from a bygone era, the soldiers gave him a more modern rifle. As the fighting intensified, Burns took cover behind a tree and began firing at advancing Confederate troops. He was wounded 3 times during the battle, but survived. When Union soldiers retreated, they had to leave Burns behind. Captured by Confederates, Burns got rid of his rifle and pretended to be just another civilian caught in the crossfire. His quick thinking likely saved his life. Today, a statue of John Burns stands at Gettysburg, commemorating the bravery of a man who, despite his age, fought to defend his town. His courage was even noted in an official report by Major General Abner Doubleday, who praised the citizen who shouldered his musket to help in the battle. Matilda Tillie Pierce. While John Burns took up arms, many of Gettysburg's civilians, like 15-year-old Tillie Pierce, found themselves caught in the chaos in other ways. As the fighting drew near, Tillie and her friends sought safety in a farmhouse they thought was far from the action. But the battlefield soon came to them as fierce fighting raged around Little Round Top. The farmhouse was turned into a field hospital for the wounded. Tillie, who had no training, threw herself into the work, bringing food and water to soldiers, helping nurses, and doing whatever she could to assist. In her memoir, Tillie later described the horrors she witnessed. One of the most shocking moments was when she saw an injured soldier crawling along the road, only to be brutally struck by an officer when he couldn't keep up. These scenes left a lasting impression on her, showing her how war impacts not just the soldiers, but the civilians who have no choice but to watch and help however they can. Tillie's story is a reminder that war doesn't just unfold on the battlefield, it invades homes and lives. Samuel Wilkerson Jr. For Samuel Wilkerson Jr., the Battle of Gettysburg was intensely personal. A correspondent for the New York Times, Wilkerson was at Gettysburg covering the battle while his son, Lieutenant Bayard Wilkerson, fought with the Union artillery. On the first day of fighting, a Confederate cannonball struck Bayard, shattering his leg. Despite efforts to save him, Bayard died. Samuel learned of his son's death while the battle was still raging. Devastated, he sat near his son's body and penned a dispatch for the Times. His grief poured into his writing, making it clear that for him, this wasn't just another story. This was a father's personal tragedy. His words captured the sorrow of a parent losing a child to war, a sentiment that would echo later in Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. Wilkerson's report concluded with a heart-wrenching line, "O you dead, who at Gettysburg have baptized with your blood a second birth of freedom in America, how you are envied." Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, commander of the 20th Maine Regiment, became one of Gettysburg's most iconic figures. On the second day of the battle, Chamberlain's regiment was tasked with defending Little Round Top, a critical position on the Union's left flank. As Confederate forces attacked again and again, Chamberlain's men held the line. When they ran low on ammunition and faced the prospect of being overrun, Chamberlain ordered a daring bayonet charge that helped repel the enemy. But the battle wasn't just a military challenge for Chamberlain. 2 of his brothers were also there, Tom, an officer, and John, a non-combatant sent to tend to the wounded. Before the fighting began, Chamberlain turned to Tom and said, "This is going to be a hard day for Mother." Miraculously, all 3 brothers survived the battle, although John was briefly captured by Confederate forces. In a letter to his wife, Chamberlain described how John returned to him, barefoot and robbed of everything, but otherwise unharmed. Chamberlain's leadership at Gettysburg became legendary, thanks in part to his later accounts and the novel The Killer Angels, which immortalized his role. Wesley Culp's story is one of divided loyalties and tragic irony. Born and raised in Gettysburg, Culp had moved to Virginia before the war. When the Civil War broke out, he joined the Confederate Army, fighting in the famous Stonewall Brigade. During the Battle of Gettysburg, Culp returned to his hometown, this time as an enemy soldier. He was killed during the fighting on Culp's Hill, land owned by his own family. As if his story wasn't tragic enough, Culp's childhood friend, Jack Skelly, was fighting for the Union. Skelly was also killed during the battle, though the two never crossed paths. According to legend, Culp was carrying a letter from Skelly to his sweetheart, Jenny Wade, Gettysburg's only civilian casualty. However, the letter was never delivered. Culp's body was never identified, and his final resting place remains unknown, a haunting reminder of how the Civil War tore families and friends apart. The Battle of Gettysburg is filled with stories like these, of courage, sacrifice, and personal tragedy. Which of these stories left the biggest impact on you? Let us know in the comments, and be sure to check out our other videos on military history. Thanks for watching. Please also like, share, subscribe for more. Bye.